You're concerned once they come out of national service, what might happen to them?
Well, there's already record numbers of ex-servicemen in prison at the moment. So if you make kids, you know, do national service for what, a year, 2 years, and then you take them out of the army, you put them back onto an estate which has got high unemployment, it's still not necessarily going to give them a job, and then perhaps you'll get a better trained kind of gangster on the street.
Does that completely undermine the argument for it, Douglas?
I think before the last election, David Cameron talked about a form of national service which wouldn't be entirely to do with military training or anything like that. I'd be very in favour of something which, for 6 months or a year, encouraged young people to understand that the society they're living in will only get better if they take a part in it. And if we can instill that somehow by an experience which, as I say, wouldn't have to have a military background to do it. It would be anything, all sorts of volunteering things, working in the charitable sector, working with other, youth groups, all sorts of things you could do. If you could set something up that instilled from an early age the idea that society is theirs and it's in their care, and they have to take part in it.
Like getting them a real job that pays them properly.
Absolutely.
But there aren't any. It's sort of your black cab driver's solution to the world, isn't it? You know, bring back national service and bring back the birch. And I always just distrust anybody who comes up with what I call these pot noodle instant solutions. That's right. Just add hot water and stir a bit and they'll work. And of course it's like, you hear a lot of this. We've had the riots this week. You talk about national service now. And I read all these commentators and I feel, in like The Guardian and The Times and The Telegraph, and I feel quite slightly depressed because it's almost like they have their worldview, they shoehorn events in to fit their worldview. I mean, Phillips, and she's saying, it's society's becoming too liberal, that's why they're all rioting and all the rest of it. You think, well, why aren't the streets of Amsterdam full of Dutch rioters?
Oh, Douglas?
Well, I'm not answering for any of the numerous people who Derry's criticising, but I mean, just the first thing I'd say is this, that no one is saying that a national service, for instance, would replace family. The problem is that we have across our society a whole set of problems that are going on.
Which is underpinned by family,
and
broken families.
One of the, absolutely, if not the central thing underpinning it, is the breakdown of the family. No doubt about that. But you can't sort of will that or wish it to happen. You have to assist it to happen somehow, and you have to assist people to feel part of a community, a part of a nation.
Your point, and yeah,
can I just stress again that the ideas of national service that have been suggested by politicians at the moment aren't, as a solely one-size-fits-all military solution to it. But I think it might be worth thinking of a more nuanced approach to this, I say, which David Cameron suggested, whereby there are types of experience, types of national service which have nothing to do with the military, that may well suit and fit and help train up young people, not only have a sense of community, have a sense of belonging, but also help them into the career which they'd go into. So it's much more nuanced than just throwing people around to march in a square.
Can I just say this, yeah? We're talking about the army. I'm going to bring some home truths here. This is what the young people I work with see. I work with gang members. They see £4 to £5 billion being spent on a war in Afghanistan, Iraq and in Libya and all these places. And then they see the same Prime Minister coming back here telling everybody that there's no jobs, there's going to be massive redundancies, no apprenticeships. So what you're saying is let's further give more investment to the army to go and deal with a problem that should be invested locally to organisations. And no, let me finish. What I'm saying is this. I'm not going to sit and just listen to us talk about the army as if to say that that is some sort of answer, when actually what is the answer is investment into local communities, organisations that are struggling. Because £4 billion, £5 billion on a war that no one's asked for.
The people of Libya are suffering and the people of Afghanistan are suffering as well.
I'm going to tell you this now. People on the streets of London don't care. What they care about is their personal life.
Yeah, £200 million a day for Libya.
They care about the fact that they ain't got no job. They care about...
It might not be an either or. It might not be allowing genocide in Libya or you getting more money for your group in London.
For you to suggest that it's okay to spend £4 to £5 billion of our money in this country on a war that none of us has asked for.
And there are plenty of people who don't think that the Libyan government should be allowed to commit genocide against their people, and you don't have to be for that.
Can I put those points? Can I put those precise points to Dr. Barack Ariel? No, Terry. Terry, I want to interrupt because we have a guest on webcam. And Douglas, it was flooding the streets with police, wasn't it, that actually brought this to an end?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there have been two things quickly. One is that there have been some people who've gone way over the top of what they think should now happen. I mean, we're sitting in Belfast. Belfast knows well that if you start putting soldiers on the streets, things can escalate very fast indeed. And I think that's a very bad idea that's been suggested. But I think that the second thing to say, though, is that there has been a terrible loss of public confidence in the police by the fact that a large number of members of the public have seen police holding back, allowing not just criminality to go on, not just looting to go on, but also in some cases members of the public being attacked by those people, and the police seeming not to have taken the role that they should have done to protect the public. So there has been a huge loss of confidence this week in the police, and it's going to take a lot of work and effort for the police to get that confidence back.
Douglas.
There clearly is a swinging back and forth from the police. You know, we saw the G20 riots, we saw the response to the policing there when the police failed to stop people storming public buildings in London in the anti-tuition fees protests earlier last year. And just one quick thing, because this has become a big political tool this week. This issue about the cuts in police numbers. Nobody, I think, in agreement from any political party or anything else, who actually wants to see fewer police on the streets. And Labour, I think, have been behaving quite disgracefully in trying to make this political point this week. What the coalition cuts are trying to do is not to cut the numbers of police on the street, but to cut the number of people sitting at desks writing out reports.
Well, you can't get the convictions so without the paperwork.
In terms of numbers, Douglas, you can have as many or more police on the street if you free them up from the paperwork.
But Douglas, they can't get the convictions without the paperwork.
Douglas, if we want these young people we've seen to show compassion and love and respect and be peaceful, as Stephen's saying, shouldn't we treat them that way?
Absolutely. Look, but there are two sides to this. Firstly, of course the police shouldn't be goading, or of course the police shouldn't be doing anything like that. They shouldn't be making those sort of mistakes. However, those mistakes, when they are made, can be on occasions remedied and so on. They can be addressed. But I just wanted to say that the other side of this equation is this. We can't let people off when they do criminal acts from being subjected to a rigorous examination publicly afterwards. Let me give an example. A lot of people get stopped and searched, and I mean the gentleman you got on here is an example. I mean, I've been stopped and searched. Most people I know, none of them have been stopped and searched. But let me just give you a quick example. It would never occur to me, and I know it wouldn't.
Douglas, have you really been stopped and searched by police?
Twice.
And
how have they gone about doing it?
I don't. Is it useful to go into? I mean,
yes.
I mean, they stopped. This is several years ago. They stop you. They ask you to show what you're carrying. Ask you to empty your pockets. All that sort of thing. Now, I don't like that. But my own feeling is this: if you think you're doing a job, you do it decently. I don't mind. I'm inconvenienced. Yeah. But if this is what's needed to keep the community safe, then fine. What would never occur to me for a moment is to store up resentment from that and to end up somewhere down the line using it as an excuse to steal trainers. And some people have been doing that.
No, let's not condone what went on in the riot.
Meanwhile, we have a parent here, Tariq Jahan, who suffered the most grievous loss and yet spoke out so eloquently and powerfully.
Mr. Jahan, I think, is the outstanding hero of this week. Such an extraordinarily moving. I don't know how he spoke, I have to say, so soon after the death of his son, the murder of his son.
And you could imagine that in that situation, the things that someone might have said.
Absolutely. I mean, what you see here is the importance of a man with moral courage.
And faith.
Even in this terrible period in his life. And he could have, as you said, he could have called for retribution. He could actually have ignited the most terrible war in his city, and he didn't. He said exactly what needed saying. These are people losing their lives.
The big irony is that students are getting mugged all the time. You know, it happens in Manchester a lot. You know, because they come from nice little leafy suburbs, they're suddenly living in an inner city area. They're quite naive. They get mugged. It just gets ignored. What happens to them? I think more fuss is being made about it because we've had the riots this week. We've seen Clapham, we've seen Tottenham.
I would disagree. It's not so much that more fuss is being made. What you
this
have
is what
here,
I think, though.
We all know the story of the Good Good Samaritan. What we have here is a guy who's bloody beaten up, you know, blood all over. And people come, and instead of actually helping and assisting him, they start stealing from him. That's what the fuss is, you know. I was horrified.
But it's also they're worried about London's PR coming up to the Olympics.
It wasn't that. It was seeing a wicked thing done on top of a wicked thing.
My horror was not...
It was, I think that for many people, what those three people said sort of speaks much louder than what they're hearing from politicians or other leaders.
It's possible. I mean, we need all these voices in the discussion. We need people on the ground to say it. We need politicians to say some of it. Sometimes you need politicians to speak out a bit more bravely on some of this stuff. But I think the fact is nobody will remember what the politicians said this week. They'll remember those people.
Douglas, are there mentors? Perhaps some might say the bankers, who they might think were responsible for this financial meltdown but didn't seem to be punished, or the MPs who fiddled their expenses, but only a handful of them were punished.
We have to get away from this thing of taking off any blame from anyone, and I don't think anyone here is, but the people who did the looting, the people who committed the acts of criminality, they are responsible for their actions, and that's the end of that. Are there underlying causes to that? Are there underlying issues that need addressing? Sure. I mean, we do live in Britain in the most extraordinarily sort of debased society. All of the people shoved on to young people as role models now are vacuous, empty, mainly lacking in any kind of achievement of the kind that a generation ago would have been thought of as an achievement. And, you know, young people notice this. They notice this vacuum. You can see it. You can see it in the behaviour of children on the streets. You can see it in what they aspire to. You can see it in the whole...
So are you going to tally up what, you know, the kind of corruption? I mean, there is a rich seam of immorality goes throughout society. So you've got your MPs trousering their expenses. You've got, you know, bankers who... you know, impoverished all of us, really, paying themselves massive bonuses.
And can I say...
You've got politicians intertwining with, corrupt press proprietors.
In each of these cases,
you know, and what seems to be corrupt police.
Yeah,
so we've got all of that going on.
They're unified by the same thing, which is an
so they should all be punished, shouldn't they?
Absolutely. They are unified by the same thing, an unwillingness to take responsibility for your own actions.
So, yes, but this is what's interesting.
And that's what the MPs did. They did not take responsibility for their actions.
Because I know you say this thing about multiculturalism, you know, you don't believe in different solutions for different, you know, cultures and all that. So let's get it down to, like, David Cameron, that kid who, he was looting, wasn't he, and he stole a bottle of water from Lidl. He's been sent down for 6 months. And yet David Cameron, when it comes to Andy Coulson, I believe in giving everybody a second chance.
We'll see what happens to Andy Coulson. Just quick, yes. I mean, as important as focusing on the things that have been attacked, actually, it's very interesting. You mentioned earlier that, you know, the things that haven't been attacked in these riots, and this does tell us a lot about the objectives of these people. You know, public buildings were not attacked. This was not a pre-revolutionary France situation.
Oh, no, it's
you know,
criminal.
Things selling just sort of borderline breadline goods were not attacked as the first priority. The first priority was luxury goods, consumerist products, and so on. And the thing about this, just quickly, is that it shows us that when criminals and there's an outbreak of violence as there is there, some people jump in and take an opportunity, and most of them did it, and they took what they wanted, and it was stealing, plain and simple.
Katie, we have to end it there because your text poll vote is in. We asked, should national service be compulsory for all young people? Could it be an answer? Here's what you told us. 74% of you who texted in said yes, it should. 26% said no. Douglas?
Just quickly, I mean, what we've seen in the last week, a nation wondering what it is, looking at itself in the mirror and wondering about it. You know, when the Pope came here last year, he said, and I'm not a Catholic, but it was a very interesting comment. He said, you have to ask yourselves as a society what it is you want to be. That question has come up that week, and I think we are very unhappy with the answer.
On those